Before you test fit your engine, there's a modification you'll need to make on your fuel tank. You will pull the internals out of it, and right here there's a small hole you'll have to drill out to it with a 1/16 drill bit. Make sure when you drill it out there's no fuzzies left, and also go ahead and pull this apart and inspect it to make sure there's no fuzzies on here. Make sure this hole is at least a 1/16. Without doing that, the RPMs we run, the engine at the RPMs will stall out and will act like it's running out of fuel. Once you do that mod, go ahead and put it all back together. Make sure this is seated down into the cap. As far as fuel lines go, we're going to run the stock fuel lines that come with it, but normally when it's time to change it out, you'll go with a better fuel line from DDM. Before you install the engine, you need to go ahead and set your tank in. Now, you need to hand tighten up this right here. This is going to shift around just a little bit, and we're going to go ahead and dry fit the engine. Usually what I'll do is I'll set it in, usually snug these down, and then I will look at, you have this spacer here that goes under the engine, and you can see right now I'm gonna have to shave some of it off. We'll go ahead and install these parts here, and like I said, we're just gonna snug them. Okay, what I've done is did a dry fit of the engine. There's one last bolt that has to come in, and you can look at this and you can see that this spacer is too tall. So you're going to have to trim off whatever is necessary to get this spacer to fit properly. You don't want this spacer to go in here and cock this engine up and put anything in a bind. You want this engine, all these parts, to be held in place as free as you possibly can. Okay, maybe hard to see, but that's about how much I shaved off of it. And I didn't shave it off to where it just slips under it. I shaved it off to where I would, when everything's loose, that this would just barely lift up on this engine, just a touch, not much. Now it's time to unassemble all this, loosen everything up, get this shim in it, go ahead and get the brakes in it, and move on to the next step. Now that your engine fitment is done, you can go around and start torquing down your screws. But now you definitely want to go in and torque everything. With these lock washers, they're pretty good at holding it together. The last bolt I'll torque up will be this one here. This one goes in. Make sure this is tight. You don't have to over torque it. You don't want to put a bind on your suspension parts or on this, but this is part of your chassis, and when you see this start to bow up, that's good. However, there are times to where this will back out, so this is one of those pre-race checks. After you race, you want to look at it, you want to check it to make sure it's not backing out. If it backs out, it could possibly end up slipping up under here, causing you a handling issue. Okay, now that the brake assembly is all put together, these stock parts here, the stock plate here and the bearing housing and brake housing, all of these stock parts are a weak link. There is alternatives. Turtle Racing being one of them has a brake mount kit. It's all aluminum. It replaces this assembly, and you don't have to worry about using this rock guard because the rock guard is made onto it. Also, either from Rovan or Turtle Racing, which I prefer, you can replace this entire piece with a nice piece of aluminum that holds your bearing. Right now my brakes are tight. Brakes on these cars are not very good. Also, you have this washer that has to go on, and then you can fit your spur gear on. Always look at it, and if the space right here, if it's too tight or rubbing, they sell a shim kit. Fast Eddie sells a shim kit. You can put a shim on this side of it to make sure that it's not rubbing. This is your fuel in. It's always a good tip to go ahead and put that fuel line on before you get yourself into this position to where you have to fight it to get it on. A lot of times when the engine is up in the air, you can slip that on with no problem. But apparently I like to fight stuff in. So next we'll be moving on to the radio tray, and I will see you guys in the next video.